Welcome to the podcast, everyone. We're diving into the new US travel and entry restrictions that are set to take effect on January 1st, 2026 at 12:01 a.m. ET. There's a lot to unpack here. Key changes, affected countries, and the legal backdrop driving this move.
Absolutely. There's so much going on. I'm curious, what are the main changes highlighted in the proclamation?
So, first off, the proclamation expands and strengthens entry restrictions. It continues full restrictions on 12 countries that were already under the ban and adds 7 more to the full restrictions list. Plus, it upgrades 2 countries from partial to full restrictions. It even adds full restrictions for individuals traveling on Palestinian Authority-issued travel documents. And then we've got 19 countries with partial restrictions, with an immigrant-only restriction specifically for Turkmenistan.
That's a significant expansion. So, if I understand correctly, these restrictions apply to nationals who are outside the US on that effective date and who don't have a valid visa by then, right?
Exactly, yeah. The policy clearly states that if you're outside the US on that date without a valid visa, you'll face these restrictions. Importantly, visas issued before the effective date are not automatically revoked. So it's a forward-oriented measure.
Right, indeed. And what about exceptions? It sounds like there are several built-in exceptions to this rule.
Yes, indeed. There are several exceptions. Lawful permanent residents, many diplomatic and official visa classes, and certain athletes for major sporting events are exempt. It also includes some special immigrant visas, asylum seekers and refugees who have already been admitted, plus case-by-case national interest exceptions that can be set by the DOJ, state, or DHS. This means that while the new restrictions are broad, they do have specific carve-outs for various categories.
That's interesting. Now, I'm thinking about the rationale behind these measures. What's driving this expansion?
The primary justification comes from persistent deficiencies seen in screening, vetting, and information sharing among a number of nations. Essentially, the White House points to unreliable or fraudulent civil documents, poor record-keeping, and challenges related to high visa overstay rates. For instance, some countries like Laos have a B1/B2 overstay rate of 28.34% in fiscal year 2024. While Sierra Leone's F/M/J overstay is at 35.83%.
Yeah, those numbers really stand out. Those overstay rates are indeed eye-opening. But I'm curious, does the fact sheet mention anything about the implementation or review process of these restrictions?
It does. The legal framing explicitly cites authority under the Immigration and Nationality Act sections 212F and 215A. Additionally, the proclamation mandates that the state, DHS, DOJ, and DNI review and report on these restrictions every 180 days to decide whether to continue or modify them. So, there's an ongoing accountability process built into this.
That's a good check. But some might argue that 180 days is still a long time for a policy that's affecting so many people. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a fair point. It leaves room for potential diplomatic pushback and legal challenges. The administration does lean on precedents like Trump vs. Hawaii from 2018, where the Supreme Court upheld similar restrictions. But, the 180-day review cycle offers a periodic reassessment, which should theoretically allow for adjustments.
I see. And speaking of legal challenges, do you foresee issues with how these exceptions might be applied? For instance, what happens with people who have pending applications versus those with historical visas?
Great question. The proclamation specifies that visas issued before the effective date won't be revoked. That means people who already have valid visas should be in the clear. However, those with pending applications or those needing waivers might face significant complications. The details, like how national interest exceptions are applied and audited, are still a bit ambiguous and could be a trigger for further debate and legal scrutiny.
Yeah, that's a tricky area. This really seems to be a balancing act between ensuring security and not unduly harming individuals who have legitimate reasons to travel. How do overstay rates factor into this?
Right. Overstay rates are a key metric mentioned. The data, like Burkina Faso's 22.95% or Malawi's 22.45% for specific visa categories, serve as indicators for why these countries were flagged. The administration argues that high overstay rates, combined with unreliable documents and questionable information sharing, justify a tighter admission policy. It's essentially about mitigating potential security risks.
Makes sense. You mentioned high visa overstay rates. Don't these rates sometimes fluctuate due to economic or social factors? Could that not be taken into account during the 180-day review cycle?
Absolutely, that's a strong point. Overstay rates can indeed vary with economic conditions or even shifts in migration dynamics. That's why the periodic reporting every 180 days is critical. It theoretically lets the administration adjust measures based on the most up-to-date information. Of course, the practical application of that is always up for debate.
I get that. Now let's consider the scope. 39 total countries are affected, 19 with full restrictions, 19 with partial, and one immigrant-only category for Turkmenistan. That seems like a broad net to cast.
Indeed, it's very broad. The full restrictions list includes not only long-standing targets like Afghanistan, Iran, and Yemen, but also extended to countries like Mali and Niger. Then, there's the added nuance of restrictions based on the travel documents used, such as those issued by the Palestinian Authority. And on top of that, there are partial restrictions that affect visa types like B1, B2, F, M, and J. It definitely casts a wide net.
Exactly, yeah. With such a comprehensive scope, what do you think will be the immediate impacts, both logistically and politically?
Logistically, embassies and consulates will be under pressure to process, review, and possibly grant exceptions where justified. Politically, this could fuel further debates on national security versus open travel policies. Some critics already argue that the measures may be seen as overly broad and potentially discriminatory against entire regions. It's likely to stir up diplomatic tensions as well, especially with those countries now facing upgraded restrictions.
Definitely. That's an important angle. There could be unintended consequences on international relations, right?
Absolutely. For example, countries who find themselves newly categorized under the full restrictions list might push back, arguing that the metrics used to justify these measures don't fully capture their security protocols or counter-terrorism efforts. It's definitely going to be a point of contention in international diplomatic circles.
Yep, I can see that. It also strikes me that the digital documentation provided, like maps and statistical charts, plays a big role in framing the narrative. How do you think that influences public perception?
The inclusion of visual elements like world maps and overstay statistics makes the argument seem more data-driven. It allows the administration to claim that these measures are based on hard evidence and not just sweeping policy moves. However, one might critique that the portrayal of such statistics can be selective. For instance, they focus on overstay rates for a few countries, leaving out a broader international context.
Sure, that's a solid critique. And speaking of the numbers, it's interesting how specific metrics like 28.34% overstay for Laos and 35.83% for Sierra Leone become shorthand for security concerns. But can they really capture the complexities of immigration dynamics?
That's a debate in itself. While these metrics offer a snapshot, they may not fully account for factors like economic hardship, political instability, or the unique administrative challenges in each country. They're best taken as one of many signals, not the whole story.
True. The proclamation also references historical legal cases like Trump versus Hawaii. How much do you think that influences its legal standing?
Citing Trump versus Hawaii, where the Supreme Court upheld similar restrictions, provides a strong legal precedent. It essentially buttresses the administration's actions by showing that similar measures have been deemed constitutional before. That said, legal challenges can always arise with new contexts and changing international dynamics. which is why those scheduled reviews are so important.
Absolutely, exactly. And what about the waiver process? How might the national interest exceptions work practically?
The waiver process is designed to allow for case-by-case exceptions that align with national interests. Essentially, if there's an overriding reason, like a major sporting event or an essential diplomatic engagement, a waiver could be granted. However, the criteria for these exceptions and how transparently they're applied will be closely watched by both domestic and international watchdogs.
Right, that's crucial. All these layers definitely make this a complex policy move. Do you foresee any major shifts in its implementation once it comes into effect?
It's hard to say definitively, but I think the real test will be in how smoothly the bureaucratic gears turn after January 1st, 2026. The administration has laid out a detailed framework, but on-the-ground implementation might reveal unforeseen challenges, both in terms of administrative bottlenecks and diplomatic backlash.
It's like a big experiment. True. And as the situation evolves, monitoring how these restrictions affect people with pending applications versus those holding older visas will be key.
Definitely. There's a lot riding on the precise operationalization of these rules. The administration has tried to balance national security concerns with the practicalities of immigration policy, but the real-world outcomes often force adaptations.
Overall, it seems that the key themes are about security, document integrity, and the tension between open immigration and national safety. Would you agree?
Yes, that's spot on. It's a classic case of using data-driven metrics to justify tighter security measures, while leaving room for debate about fairness and international relations. These travel restrictions are as much a political statement as they are a policy tool.
Yeah. Thanks for breaking that down. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds and what effects it has on global travel and diplomacy.
Absolutely. We'll be keeping an eye on those 180-day reviews and the diplomatic conversations that are sure to heat up in response. Stay tuned for further developments.
Thanks for the discussion. It really sheds light on both the details and the wider picture. Catch you next time.